At 7 in the morning, I got dragged out of sleep by somebody pounding on my front door like the house was on fire. Except the fire, as it turned out, was just Karen's personality. I looked through the blinds coffee, not even in my system yet, and there she was in my driveway hauling a bright orange extension cord across 3 lawns. Then she yelled that my Tesla charger was community property and she had every right to charge her Lexus hybrid on my dime. You ever see something so stupid your brain refuses to process it for a second? That was me standing there in pajama pants staring at this woman while 2 neighbors in bathrobes watched from across the street, one already recording. Karen had one hand on her hip, the other waving a highlighted copy of the HOA bylaws. Karen wasn't technically the HOA president, but that had never stopped her from acting like she ran the place. The day before had been normal. I came home from work, parked the Tesla, plugged it into the wall charger I paid to install, then went inside and ate dinner with my wife, Melanie. We'd put solar panels on the house the year before, paid for the panels, the permits, the labor, the charger, all of it. To me, it was practical. To Karen, apparently, it was a personal insult. She'd already cornered me twice, asking why I got free electricity while she still had to pay for gas. I told her nothing about my setup was free. She waved me off and muttered something about shared community resources. I thought it was just Karen being dramatic. I stepped outside, and before I could speak, she launched into a speech about fairness while dragging that ridiculous cord behind her. She shoved the bylaws at my chest and pointed to a line she claimed proved my garage outlet belonged to the neighborhood. I looked down and nearly laughed. She was quoting a clause about HOA maintenance for streetlights and storm drains. When I told her that she planted both fists on her hips and said dead serious electricity is a communal right, Karen saw a few neighbors gathering and leaned harder into the performance. She said I was selfish. I thought I was better than everybody else because I drove a Tesla and she was only trying to save money and save the planet. Then she angled her Lexus halfway onto my driveway, crushed the edge of Melanie's flower bed, and demanded I plug her in. I told her no. Calm, firm, simple. I said it was unsafe. It could damage her car. It could damage my system, and most importantly, it was mine. She stomped her foot and announced she'd call an emergency HOA meeting. That was when Melanie stepped outside, holding her coffee like she was walking onto a stage she was already tired of. She looked at Karen, looked at the giant orange cord stretched across half the block, then said, "Does this look like a discussion to you, or a home invasion with accessories?" People laughed. Somebody actually clapped. Karen went red, pointed at both of us, swore we'd regret humiliating her, and dragged the cord back to her car. As she left, I had that sinking feeling you get when a crazy moment isn't the end of the story. It's the opening scene. By that evening, she'd taped flyers to everybody's door announcing an emergency HOA meeting to address communal access to eco-friendly charging solutions, which was just Karen's way of making theft sound progressive. She stood at the front with poster boards showing enlarged photos of my Tesla like she was presenting evidence in a criminal trial. She gave a speech about inequality and green energy and justice, and how my charger symbolized everything wrong with the neighborhood. Every few sentences, she'd quote another bylaw she clearly didn't understand. I sat near the back taking notes because people like Karen thrive when nobody documents the nonsense. Then she made her proposal. Any homeowner with an electric or hybrid vehicle should have unrestricted access to my charger, and since I had taken the first step, I should cover the cost. Marty, a retired fire inspector and one of the quietest men on the block, stood up. He took Karen's highlighted packet, read it for maybe 10 seconds, then looked around the room and said, "This woman is one bad adapter away from setting a garage on fire, and if any of you listen to her, I hope your insurance agent has a sense of humor." That was the twist Karen didn't see coming. She tried to call Marty. Biased, claimed experts were always wrong, said she had done research online. Even the people who usually humored her looked embarrassed. Her proposal died right there. That should have been the end, but humiliation doesn't make entitled people reflect, it makes them escalate. 2 days later, a neighbor texted me a picture of Karen crouched beside my garage wall while I was at work. Then Melanie caught her trying to jam some cheap adapter into an outdoor outlet on the side of the house. Karen claimed the cord had slipped into the socket by accident, which is not a sentence any honest adult has ever said. That night I found fresh scuffs on the charger, and that was enough for me. I installed cameras. A few evenings later, the garage lights flickered while I was inside reading. I walked out and found Karen half in my garage, holding an off-brand charging adapter. She said she was conducting an inspection. I told her she was trespassing. She ignored me, forced the adapter toward the outlet, and sparks snapped out with that nasty little pop that turns your blood cold. The smell of burnt plastic hit first. Karen yelped, dropped the adapter, then somehow blamed me for not properly labeling my own equipment. Melanie took pictures while I killed the breaker. By morning, the footage was everywhere, and Karen had a new nickname: Sparky. Instead of backing off, Karen decided she was a martyr. She started circulating a petition about energy democracy, knocked on doors, and told anyone who'd listen that I was hoarding power from the community. Marty came over with a licensed electrician named Luis to inspect the damage. Luis took one look at the scorch marks and the junk adapter Karen had dropped, then explained that wrong voltage and wrong connectors could fry a battery, damage my system, or start a fire. Of course, Karen wandered over and accused Luis of being part of a Tesla conspiracy. Luis showed her the numbers. Karen stared at them like math had insulted her family, then announced that science had been wrong before and she had her own research. Marty leaned toward me and muttered, "Some people treat ignorance like a constitutional right." A week later, Karen made the move that finally blew the whole circus apart. I was in the backyard grilling when I heard a low humming sound from the garage. I ran around the side of the house and found Karen's Lexus half in my driveway with some bargain bin splitter jammed into my charger cables, taped together like a hostage note for common sense. Karen was in the driver's seat, grinning like she'd just won. The dashboard blinked, died, blinked again. Sparks spit from the connection, and the smell of burning rubber rolled out from under the hood. I shouted for her to kill it, but before either of us moved, there was a loud pop. Smoke poured from the vents, thick and gray, and Karen's face changed from victory to panic in half a second. She stumbled out screaming that I had sabotaged her car. By then, 3 neighbors were already filming. Melanie had called 911. Marty came running with a fire extinguisher. Sirens started up in the distance, and suddenly my front yard looked like the finale of the dumbest show on earth. The fire marshal arrived, took one look at the scorched outlet and melted cable, then asked Karen why she kept touching equipment that didn't belong to her. She launched into a speech about community rights and HOA authority. The deputy beside him just blinked and asked, "Ma'am, do you understand the difference between private property and a fantasy?" At the HOA meeting the next evening, the clubhouse was overflowing. Karen showed up in pearls and a blazer, still trying to posture her way out of consequences. She gave one last speech about corruption and oppression by private charging stations. Then I stood up with my folder. Permits, receipts, inspection reports, still photos from the cameras, and finally the video. I played the clip of Karen sneaking onto my property, rigging that mess into my charger, her Lexus lighting up like a cheap carnival ride, then dying in a puff of smoke. Karen shrieked that the footage was fake, that deepfakes were destroying America. The board president, who had spent weeks trying to stay polite, finally stopped being polite. He said my charger was private property, fully permitted, fully legal, and completely outside HOA control. Then the board voted unanimously. Karen's proposal was dead. She was fined several $1,000s for dangerous tampering, stripped of her board role, and warned that any future stunt would bring legal action. Her Lexus got towed the next morning, battery fried beyond repair. The deputy cited her for trespassing and reckless endangerment. And just like that, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood got dethroned by basic wiring camera footage and her own unbelievable arrogance. I put a steel lockbox over the charger after that. But the part that stayed with me wasn't the fine or the meeting or even the sight of that smoked-out Lexus sitting crooked in my driveway. It was realizing how far some people will go once they decide wanting something is the same thing as being entitled to it. Greed rarely walks in calling itself greed. Sometimes it shows up wearing pearls, talking about fairness, demanding access to things it never earned. The neighborhood got lighter after that. Kids drew chalk pictures of a Tesla zapping a Lexus. Somebody joked about putting up a plaque by the clubhouse that said "The Great Charger Wars." Karen still lived there, but she stopped making eye contact. The rumors, the speeches, the little crusades, gone. And I'm not gonna lie, every time I plug in my Tesla now and hear that soft little click, it feels like justice with a sound effect. So tell me this, where do you think the line is between community and entitlement? Was Karen just ridiculous? Or do people like that get dangerous the second nobody checks them? And if you've ever had a power-hungry neighbor, an HOA tyrant, or somebody who thought your property somehow belonged to them, drop your story too. Because I swear the wildest part of this whole mess is knowing I'm probably not the only one.